Operation Paperclip was when, after World War II, the United States gathered up a ton of scientists from Nazi Germany, brought them over to America, and even Werner von Braun. They had Werner von Braun run NASA. He was a Nazi, like 100% Nazi.
Good. Imagine a world where groundbreaking medical advancements were built on human suffering, on deliberate human experimentation. This isn't a dystopian novel, it's history. Project Paperclip isn't just a forgotten footnote in the aftermath of World War II. It's a chilling reminder of how far governments were willing to go in the name of science, national security, and power. Tonight, we'll uncover the unsettling truth about the Nazi scientists brought to America under this secret program, the horrors they left behind, and the moral compromises that still echo in medicine and technology today. And trust me, you won't believe the disturbing details we're about to reveal. World War II ended in 1945, with Europe in ruins. Cities were leveled, millions were dead, and the world was trying to comprehend the scale of the destruction. But in the ashes of Nazi Germany lay something both the United States and the Soviet Union desperately wanted: science. The Nazi regime, despite its atrocities, had poured staggering amounts of money and manpower into technological development. They built advanced rocketry, experimented with jet engines, pushed the boundaries of aviation, medicine, and carried out research often on unwilling human subjects that most Allied nations hadn't dared to attempt. As Allied troops advanced, they stumbled upon secret research facilities, abandoned labs, and stacks of classified documents. The race began immediately. Who could capture the scientists, their notes, and their expertise first? For the Soviets, this was about gaining an edge in their rebuilding and asserting dominance in Eastern Europe. For the Americans, it was about more than science, it was about survival. The Cold War was just beginning, and every scrap of knowledge could tip the balance of power. And so, Operation Overcast was born, a covert American plan to recruit German scientists. Soon renamed Project Paperclip, the program's name came from the simple paperclips attached to personnel files of scientists the US wanted to clean up and import. Officially, President Truman's 1945 directive banned anyone actively involved in Nazi activities from entering the program. But behind the scenes, US intelligence agencies altered records, downplayed affiliations, and in some cases, outright erased evidence of war crimes. The logic was blunt. If America didn't recruit these men, the Soviets would. And so, hundreds of German scientists, engineers, physicists, chemists, and doctors were quietly smuggled into the United States. Some would become household names. Werner von Braun, for instance, would go from designing rockets for the Nazis to leading America's space program and putting men on the moon. But others carried darker legacies. Men whose expertise was built not in laboratories of innovation, but in concentration camps, where human beings were reduced to test subjects. Before we dive deeper into the disturbing role Nazi doctors played, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me keep uncovering these hidden chapters of history and sharing them with you. This brings us to what historians call the doctor's dilemma. The US wasn't just recruiting rocket engineers, it was also quietly bringing in Nazi doctors, medical researchers directly involved in some of the most disturbing experiments of the war. Consider what these experiments looked like. At Dachau, prisoners were forced into freezing water to test survival times. Some were plunged into ice baths, their core body temperature dropping until they lost consciousness or died. Others were locked into low-pressure chambers to simulate the effects of high-altitude flight, gasping for breath as their lungs collapsed. Victims were deliberately infected with malaria, typhus, and hepatitis. They were exposed to chemical weapons and forced to endure surgery without anesthesia. The Nuremberg trials, which began in late 1945, revealed these horrors in graphic detail. Many Nazi doctors were prosecuted, and several were executed. But here's the disturbing twist. While the world was condemning Nazi doctors as criminals against humanity, some of those very same doctors were quietly being offered new lives in the United States. One example is Dr. Hubertus Strughold, later celebrated as the father of space medicine in Germany. Strughold's institute had overseen cruel hypothermia and high-altitude experiments on prisoners. But after Paperclip, he became a central figure in American aviation medicine and helped lay the groundwork for manned spaceflight. For decades, his reputation in the US was spotless. NASA even named a library after him, until historians exposed his Nazi past. Another is Dr. Kurt Blome, who had overseen Nazi biological warfare research. At Nuremberg, he admitted to experimenting with plague vaccines on concentration camp inmates. He was acquitted, and soon after, US intelligence quietly recruited him for research into chemical and biological warfare. The justification given by American officials was straightforward but chilling. These men had knowledge that might save American lives in the future, especially if the Soviets developed similar capabilities. Better to have them with us than against us. But in making that calculation, the US government chose to ignore a fundamental truth. This knowledge was built on human suffering. So what came of this? What exactly did the US gain, and what did the victims lose? Some paperclip doctors contributed directly to America's medical and military programs. Strughold's work on the effects of extreme environments became essential for the Air Force and NASA. His research informed everything from spacesuits to emergency survival gear for pilots. Others, like Blome, advised on chemical and biological warfare, feeding into America's Cold War stockpiles and strategies. The uncomfortable reality is this. The US may have benefited from insights rooted in Nazi experiments. To this day, debates rage about whether modern treatments for hypothermia, for example, owe anything to the data collected at Dachau. While most mainstream medicine rejects using Nazi data, there are cases where researchers argued the information was too unique to ignore. But here's what gets lost in those debates: the victims. Each statistic in those Nazi reports was a human life. A prisoner stripped of dignity, used as a test subject, often tortured and killed in the name of research. Families were destroyed, names erased, and suffering reduced to numbers on a chart. The haunting question remains: even if a medical discovery saves lives today, what does it mean if it was born in atrocity? Can good science emerge from evil? Or does using such data perpetuate the very dehumanization that created it? This is the legacy of the unseen scars, benefits that may exist, but always stained by the suffering of those who never consented. Why should we care about Paperclip now, decades later? Because the dilemmas it created are still with us. After the Nuremberg trials, the world established the Nuremberg Code, a landmark in medical ethics. It declared that no medical experiment should be conducted without voluntary, informed consent. It was supposed to be the safeguard against ever-repeating Nazi crimes. And yet, we've seen echoes of Paperclip's mindset in modern times. The Tuskegee syphilis study in the United States lasted from the 1930s into the 1970s. Hundreds of African American men were left untreated for syphilis, so researchers could observe the natural progression of the disease even after effective treatments were available. In the 1950s and 60s, cancer patients and prisoners were exposed to radiation without proper consent in secret government experiments. Even today, debates rage over the ethics of stem cell research, gene editing, and artificial intelligence in healthcare. The justification is always framed in terms of greater good. But Paperclip shows us how slippery that slope can be. The core lesson is this: science without ethics can quickly become exploitation. Progress without accountability can mask abuse. Informed consent, transparency, and oversight aren't just bureaucratic hurdles. They're the hard-earned safeguards written in the blood of those who suffered in experiments past. So what do we take away from all of this? Project Paperclip is not just a story about Nazi scientists who came to America. It's about the choices governments make when faced with the temptation of knowledge. Yes, Paperclip contributed to rockets, jets, space, medicine, and perhaps even modern treatments. But it also left a moral stain, one that forces us to ask difficult questions. Should nations ever compromise justice for progress? Can we separate scientific discoveries from the atrocities that produced them? And how do we ensure that future advances, whether in genetics, AI, or space exploration, don't cross the same ethical lines? When we marvel at modern achievements, we must also remember the hidden costs. Every time we look at the stars and celebrate spaceflight, there's a shadow, the reminder that some of the knowledge that got us there was born in suffering. Project Paperclip challenges us to recognize that progress and morality are not separate tracks. They are bound together. And if we ignore that, we risk repeating the same mistakes. In the end, Project Paperclip isn't just history, it's a warning. A reminder that the pursuit of knowledge must never come at the expense of humanity. Because if we forget the victims, if we excuse the compromises, then we risk becoming the very thing we swore never to be. This has been Sealed Secrets. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more forbidden histories and chilling mysteries. Every week, we open the files they never wanted you to see, because the truth is never where they say it is.